Alright, so I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and assume that everyone watching this video today probably hates, with a capital HATES, going to the dentist. I mean, am I literally the only one who gets spinal chill? Just imagine the sound of that little drill. And they sit there and complain about your poor flossing habits while poking your gums with a freaking scalpel. Well, guess what? Today, and Rolling Through History, we're going to learn about three naval dentists who are not your typical old dentist in the office. Now, you see, these guys actually volunteered for the combat roles and will receive the Medal of Honor for their actions during three separate engagements of the most brutal fighting that America has ever seen. You see, they were trained to save teeth, but yet they were also trained to take ground. You see, their hands fit best with sutures and with scalpels, sure, but machine guns, rifles, well, they fit all the same. You're on three separate battlefields, two in France in 1918 and one in Saipan in 1944. Today's video highlights three dentists who chose to stand fast when chaos surged forward. Under artillery, shellfire, and bayonets, they proved that courage is not defined by one's specialty, but by one's resolve. Bella Wood was alive with death. Shells screamed overhead and detonated among shattered trees as U.S. Marines surged forward towards the village of Bourg-West. German machine guns ripped through the morning air. Men fell in the wheat fields and at the forest edge, where cries swallowed by the thunder of artillery. Among the men were Navy dentists, Lieutenant Junior Grade Whedon E. Osborne, attached to the 6th Regiment of the U.S. Marines. He did not carry a rifle. What he did carry with him were the tools of a combat medic. You see, earlier that day he had volunteered to leave his post behind as a Sergeant General and to go out as a field medic to get field experience. As the Marines launched their now legendary advance across Bella Wood, Osborne threw himself into the maelstrom without hesitation. He ran towards the wounded and not away from the fire. Again and again he crossed ground swept by bullets and shell fragments, dragging wounded Marines from where they had fallen. The fighting was at its fiercest. This was the heart of the advance, for the line wavered and death seemed unavoidable. Yet Osborne worked tirelessly, lifting, carrying, refusing to abandon any man who still breathed. Out in the open, he saw a wounded officer, surrounded by falling artillery. During the barrage, Osborne bent, lifted the officer onto his shoulders, and began moving him to safety. The shells fell closer, the air cracked with violence and noise. Just steps from cover, an explosion tore through the space around them. When the smoke cleared, both men laid still. Whedon Osborne became the first officer of the Navy Dental Corps killed in action. He died as he had lived that day, fighting on his feet for the men around him. For his extraordinary heroism, he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Bella Wood would go on to be remembered as a Marine Corps legend, rightfully so. But among its heroes that day was a dentist who never fired a shot, yet still saved several lives that day. Weeks earlier, on another stretch of the French front, artillery fire pounded Marine positions without mercy. Explosions churned the earth, collapsing trenches and tearing through exposed men. Amid the bombardment, crippled Thomas Reagan was struck, badly wounded, bleeding out under the constant shell fire. I blamed any Marine that chose to stay down that day. But Lieutenant Commander Alexander G. Lyle, a Navy dental surgeon serving with the 5th Marine Regiment that day, did the opposite. As shells burst all around him, Lyle rose and ran toward Corporal Reagan's position. He crossed open ground under fire, fully exposing himself, knowing that every step could be his last. He reached the corporal and immediately went to work. With explosions still rocking the battlefield, Lyle administered emergency surgical aid on the spot. There was no shelter, no pause in the enemy's bombardment, only urgency. His hands moved with precision, despite the chaos, stopping the bleeding, stabilizing the wound, refusing to yield to fear or distraction. Because of Lyle's actions that day, Corporal Reagan lived. That day, Lyle demonstrated that heroism does not always come with a charge or a weapon. Sometimes it comes with steady hands, under fire, and the refusal to abandon your man. For his extraordinary heroism and dedication to duty that day, Lyle received the Medal of Honor for his actions. Unlike Osborne, though, his war did not end there. No, he would go on to become the first dental officer to achieve the rank of Vice Admiral. But his defining moment came in the mud and smoke of the French front, when he ran towards danger with nothing but his medical skills, and his courage. Now, if Belleau Wood was a fight to the death for the Marine Corps, well, Saipan was, how would you say, a turd sandwich, and there's no mustard. Before dawn of July 7, 1944, Japanese forces launched one of the largest banzai attacks of the Pacific War. Between 3,000 and 5,000 soldiers crashed into the lines of the 1st and 2nd Battalions of the 105th Infantry Regiment. Perimeter was shattered. The enemy poured their gaps, overrunning positions and cutting down the defenders. Captain Benjamin L. Salomon, the battalion surgeon, was working inside of a small aid station tent on the front of the lines when the first of the wounded arrived, and more. And within minutes, roughly 30 injured soldiers filled the space, some walking, others crawling, but many of them carried in as the fighting began to rage outside the tent. The commander collapsed around him, and as Salomon worked desperately to treat the wounded, Japanese soldiers broke through the tent, one entering with a bayonet and a helpless man lying near the floor. Dropping his medical sutures, Benjamin picked up an M1 Garand instead, dropped to the prone position, and pow! Dropped the enemy soldier right there. Then 7 more enemy combatants entered the tent. Firing from the hip, Benjamin Salomon legitimately took out all 7 combatants right there from the hip. Chicken wing style! Realizing that the position could not be held any longer, Salomon made a decision that sealed his fate that day. He ordered the wounded to evacuate to the regimental aid station. Now, he would stay behind. Grabbing a rifle, Salomon rushed outside into the chaos. Nearby, a machine gun crew had been wiped out. He took the gun and turned it on the advancing enemy. Alone, he held the line, pouring fire into wave after wave of attackers. Days later, when American forces finally retook the area, they found Salamon's body at the machine gun. In front of his position lay 98 dead enemy soldiers, piled where they had fallen. Captain Benjamin L. Salomon had not survived, but dozens of wounded Americans had, because he chose to fight instead of flee. His Medal of Honor would come decades later, delayed by debate and bureaucracy. But history would not forget what happened on Saipan. A dentist stood alone against an army and refused to surrender his patients. Serious question, folks. Why the heck is there not a movie made about that guy? That would be a freaking blockbuster bestseller.